Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here coming at you with another weekly review of this one for week 14 of the 2023-24 NBA season. We are through the end of January. We are only a couple of short weeks away from the All-Star break. This season is flying, ladies and gents, and a lot has happened in the last week, whether it be individual performances, whether it be some shakers and movers, and whether indeed it is the end of some resume building proportions of people's seasons. This year has yet to finish. The season is barely at the halfway point, and a lot is happening across the league. So without further ado, let's get into it. The review for week 14 of the 23-24 NBA season. Starting at the top of the pile, once again we start with Atlanta 3-0 on the week, 21-27 on the season. Of course, this is the week January 27 through to February 2nd. Atlanta 3-0, 21-7 on the week. Defeated the Raptors, the Lakers, and the Suns, and Trae Young. A massive week. 29.3 points, 1.7 rebounds, 13.3 assists, 2 steals, 0.3 blocks, 5.7 turnovers, the real crux out of all of that, but 49.2% from the field, 58.3 from deep, and 87.5 from the free throw line. A lot of conversation around whether he should or shouldn't have been an all-star. Look, I can see the argument both ways. To be honest with you, he was very close for my liking. Very close. In fact, based on the contributions that he's had this season, wouldn't have had any issue with him joining the all-star team. But at the end of the day, you've got a lot of people who are going to be basing their judgment off what they see, how everyone plays, how the team performs, chemistry, you name it. It becomes a really key thing for a lot of voters. So I can totally understand where they're coming from here. He's probably a bit unlucky. Ultimately, you're talking about a guy who's averaging 27 and 10 assists. It doesn't happen very often. He's playing very well. But when you really look at how everyone is paying attention right now, it does make it very hard for him to get in the game. Personally, yeah, I did have him as an all-star. I'm not shattered that he didn't get in. I had him as an all-star, but I can understand why he didn't do it. And again, when you're 6 games below 500 and there are crucial wins that are credited to your teammates, very hard for you to make a case from there. Boston 2-2 on the week, 37-12 on the season, defeated New Orleans, Indiana, and lost to the Clippers and the Lakers. Jason Tatum with a bounce-back week there. 25.5 points, 8.8 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.3 blocks a game, 3.5 turnovers. 50% from the field, 41.9% from deep, 86.7% from the free throw line. A man I did have as an all-star. The man I very much had as one of the 5 leaders in the all-star race in the Eastern Conference when voting was up, so to speak. He's having a really good season. Boston having a really good season. It now starts coming down to, are they a team that wins 50 games first or a team that loses 20 games first? And it's a philosophy that Phil Jackson adopted in his assessment of good to great teams and championship contending teams, and Boston now falls right into that. They're a team that's certainly going to win 50 games before they lose 20 games. Based on how Milwaukee are fluctuating a little bit now, again, they're still one of the 2 best teams in the East, but the only certainty right now is Boston as the 1 seed. We're going to talk about how one of the MVP contenders is now not going to be an MVP contender and likely to miss some significant time. We're talking about a Bucks team that's not seeing some good chemistry, and realistically, as much as I love New York and Cleveland and the way they go about it, and have certainly gone about it over the month of January, it's not something that really I sit there and go, geez, Boston are in trouble. Unless anyone's going to make a move in the month of March, I think Boston certainly now have to be absolutely favourite to come out of the East. And they've got the depth, they've got the talent, they've now got 2 All-Stars. Really interesting times right now for the Boston Celtics. They have started to genuinely make that move. Just before the All-Star break, they're starting to make that move. Brooklyn 2-1 on the week. They are still 9 games below. They are 19-28 on the season. Defeated Houston and Utah. Lost out to Phoenix, and you can see that complimentary photo there of Cam Thomas with those uniforms. 29 points, 4 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.3 blocks. Really nice, effective splits. And the make or break, honestly, for Brooklyn in the week. Just as they thought Ben Simmons was back and firing, Ben Simmons is out. He's played one game this calendar year, and he's out again. And looked like it was going to be a nice little fit, a guy that can come off the bench who's not going to be worried about scoring, because you're going to have Cam Thomas, you're going to have Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie, Lonnie Walker. It's like, great, Ben Simmons is going to fit in here nicely. Keep that offense running, playing some good D. Now he's not able to even worry about doing that. He's out again. Started to fit in really nicely as that piece, and yeah, just a shame, unfortunately, that he's going to be out again. Not sure for what level or for what period of time, but he's certainly out, and Brooklyn left to lick their wounds. But a nice 2-1 week. Cam Thomas with a really nice week. A team on the opposite side of things that did not have a nice week was the Charlotte Hornets. Didn't win a game, 0-4, 10-37 on the season. They are as bad as the San Antonio Spurs, and I think if you took some of the veterans off this Charlotte team and gave them to San Antonio, who knows, could have 20 wins on the board. Charlotte lost to Utah, New York, Chicago, and Oklahoma City. Brandon Miller with a really nice week. The best showing consistently for him so far in his young career. 22.5 points, 3.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals and 0.8 blocks, less than 2 turnovers. 46.8 from the field, 35.5 from deep, 87.5 from the free throw line. Talk that Miles Bridges is still potentially on the way out, and talk that he may be going to Phoenix. Not a big fan of Miles Bridges. I think everyone can understand why I'm not a fan of Miles Bridges. But there's a chance he's on the move to a much more productive team. A team that would certainly get some interesting use out of him. And I think pairing him against Nurkic, unless Nurkic is part of the deal, and you see him with a Kevin Durant, and a Devin Booker, and a Bradley Beal, Phoenix cracking that top 6, all of a sudden the West becomes really interesting. I think there's just a level of disharmony right now. You know, the league isn't as talented as people say it is. At the top end, absolutely. But beyond the top end, ugh. I mean, how many teams do we actually look at and go, geez, you shouldn't be in the NBA? That should really tell you exactly where the league sits right now. Charlotte's part of that group. Their one shining hope. Their best player this year, they traded away. Yes, that's correct. Terry Rozier got traded. They're really buying into the LaMelo thing. I don't blame them. But they are not a good basketball team at all. They have a lot of work to do. Speaking of work to do, and they've started to put it in, Chicago. 2-1 on the week, 23-26 on the season. Wins against Portland and Charlotte, lost out to Toronto. DeMar DeRozan, for me, their best player on the week. 20 points, 4.3 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.7 blocks, 2.3 turnovers, 48.8% from the field, 78.3 from the line, 22.2 from deep. And their biggest story isn't even someone who produced. It's the guy who somehow has been wanting to get out of the team all year, and the only option he had was to go to Detroit, so he went under the surgeon's knife, and that was Zach LaVine. Now, I'm not going to comment any further. It's obviously a sarcastic comment. I don't know how injured he is. He's clearly showed some production over the years for Chicago. Had a really blistering breakout season as an individual, where essentially the only scoring records that he didn't hold at the end of it were held by Mike. But you're now looking at a Chicago team, one of their key pieces currently not on the trade block. And I would think, depending on medicals right now, he's not going to be on the trade block for a while. Rumour has it Andre Drummond is the next cab off the rank. Don't like the idea they're going to move him on, because I think he's been super productive and epically key for their revival here towards 500. But it'll be an interesting time. I think it's interesting enough that the guy that everyone talked about has been the chemistry issue. The guy they've been wanting to trade saw the option to go into Detroit and chose a scalpel instead. It speaks a lot about Detroit, and don't worry, we'll get to them. Cleveland 3-0 on the week, 30-16 on the season. They have had a massive January, rewarded by the guy on screen as the player of the month in the East. Defeated the Clippers, Detroit, and Memphis, and another big week by Donovan Mitchell. 32.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 9 assists. This is the kind of thing Devin Booker's been putting up. Everyone's loving and heaping praise on Devin Booker. No one's talking about the production of Donovan Mitchell. No one's apologised for how much they wrote Donovan Mitchell off. 1.3 steals, 0.7 blocks, less than 3 turnovers, 53.8 from the field, 34.4 from deep, 77.3 from the free throw line. Cleveland are going to start to make a move. And they're doing it, as I mentioned, without Darius Garland, and they're doing it without Evan Mobley. genuine second option All-Star, genuine third option All-Star, and genuine Defensive Player of the Year candidate. All three of those titles belong across those two guys. 30 and 16. Now, I don't think Cleveland are going to put a 20-4 run together to get 50 ahead of 20. But they're really making a case right now, depending on how Philadelphia look, to be the third best team in the East. That's a home court advantage in one round. Now, it would be interesting to see them then play the second seed, which may be Milwaukee. Depending how Milwaukee goes, could be a replay with New York. But Cleveland are playing really well. Donovan Mitchell's playing really well. We're talking about a top 10 MVP candidate in Donovan Mitchell. I don't even hesitate to say it. He's had a huge January, a huge 6 weeks since all of those guys have gone out. Absolutely lifted and balled. And yet no credit. Absolutely no credit. I mean, the Player of the Month stuff's great, but how much has that been highlighted across mainstream media? Guy is putting in absolute work. A team that needs to put in absolute work, that's the Detroit Pistons. 1-3 in the week, 6-42. And they are slowly getting out of the rut. Potentially not the worst team to ever lace them up, but I tell you what, they're still taking that mantle in my book. Defeated OKC, lost to Washington, Cleveland, and the Clippers. Bojan Bogdanovic, 22.5 points, 1.8 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.5 steals a game, 2.8 turnovers, 50.8 from the field, 46.9 from deep, 88.2 from the free throw line. This is a guy that needs to get on a contending team, and he needs to be able to do very similar to what he and Joe Ingles were doing in Utah. Because if he can go back to doing that, you present a contender. A veteran who can score, who can play defense, who can be a locker room leader, who can be a chemistry builder. It's just that he could do that for Detroit. There's no doubt he could do that for Detroit. But Detroit don't have Orlando's roster, which is why Ingles fits in so well in Orlando. If Detroit had that level of roster with Bogdanovic, yeah, they have a far better team. But that's currently not the case right now. They have 6 wins. 6. They are barely, and I mean it, barely better than Washington. Or barely below Washington. And that's not a compliment. From my book, they're the only 2 teams with single-digit wins so far this season. A lot of work to do for the Pistons. Indiana 1-3 on the week. 27-23. They're about the same mark they were at the All-Star game last year. Defeated Memphis, lost to Boston, New York and Sacramento. And Pascal Siakam continuing to push. And a guy who probably was close to All-Star, and I personally probably have him as an All-Star at this point. He won't be, but he's who I would have as an All-Star right now, had he not been traded. 20.5 points, 6.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1 steal, 0.3 blocks a game, 55.6 from the field, 33.3 from deep, 75 from the free throw line. One guy particular in this team who I didn't expect to make the conversation about has made the conversation about, and that's Tyrese Halliburton, the comment of 65 games. Now, Tyrese Halliburton can come from a bit of a different perspective. This is a guy who has genuinely been injured, who has genuinely missed games and isn't part of that squad that just doesn't play. But at the same time, we can't be sitting here and then trying to alternate the rules again after we had to put in rules because players had tried to alternate the rules. Only one player in league history has not played at least 85% of the season ever and won the MVP. That was Bill Walton in 1977-78 when the Blazers were 48-10 in the 58 games he played, which is the equivalent of a 68 win pace. Big difference. Big difference. It was an outlier, there's no doubt about it, and there are plenty of cases to be made that Bill Walton shouldn't have won the MVP. In fact, many argue that it's much like a lot of MVPs. It then comes off the heels of some really good play the year prior, which is what I think a lot of people felt was happening with Walton. And Halliburton's going to really struggle, and I think that's the worry that he's got. He's seen the All-Star voting, he's seen the level of appreciation people now have for his game. Again, was doing some similar stuff last year, probably not to the exact consistency level, but was performing to a level that he should have been an all-star last year, that should have got the appreciation last year. Now he started to get it and understood that, hey, there's an all-NBA team in my sights, and here's a guy that's probably not going to get those games. So, that's how the cookie crumbles. That's just how it is. I didn't think there should have really needed to be a rule for people to have enough common sense that if you're not going to play more games than another person, you're not going to get in. I thought that was enough common sense, but here we are. Siakam's still having a nice season, but I just think Halliburton getting on the soapbox, not the guy to be getting on the soapbox. I understand his position, but of everyone in the league right now, the guy who just went out injured certainly could be on the soapbox for that. In fact, he kind of did last year for all the wrong reasons. For Miami, 2-2 on the week, 26-23, so surprisingly still sitting around that same mark as Indiana, and they have really started, Miami and Indiana, they have certainly started to drop away and separate themselves from where New York and Cleveland are currently sitting there. Defeated the Kings, defeated the Wizards, lost out to the Knicks and lost out to Phoenix. Jimmy Butler with a nice week, 27.3 points, 8 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 1.5 steals, 62.5 from the field, 66.7 from deep, 80.5 from the stripe. Butler's able to have these weeks. I don't think there's an issue with Jimmy Butler consistently trying to have these weeks, but the big issue that comes to play with all of this is you can't rely on Jimmy Butler all the time right now. I'm not saying that he's in a Steph Curry position with the Heat, and at no point am I comparing him to Steph Curry. But it was clear, as I said last week, and I've said time and time again, the leader of the Miami Heat was re-established in the finals last year, when Bam Adebayo was clearly the best player on the team. And he's been clearly their best player this season, clearly an all-star for my book. And all of a sudden, people just seem to forget about that when Jimmy Butler has a good week or a good game. I understand it. Jimmy Butler's a pretty good player. Jimmy Butler's consistently been one of the best players on the planet. You can argue over the last 5 years, based on the success he's been able to drag his teams to, yeah, you make a case Jimmy Butler's been a top 10 player in the NBA. Don't know anyone that's going to disagree when you look at the results. But this year isn't it. And I think that's something with a lot of teams that they need to start, people need to start getting over the fact that just because they've done it previously doesn't mean they're doing it now. It seems it's this whole era of, they were good and they've got a name value. Well, it did reach a point where Larry Bird just wasn't an all-star. It did reach a point where Larry Bird just wasn't in the conversation as the best player in the NBA. Michael Jordan's last 2 years, they're genuine, he wasn't the best player in the league. Shaq wasn't the best player in the league. Kobe wasn't the best player in the league. Duncan wasn't the best player in the league. It doesn't happen. It happens a lot. Guys like a lot, it's not disrespectful. It's just how the game is. So I don't think it's disrespectful to suggest that Jimmy Butler's not the leader of the Heat, or that the Heat can't rely on him anymore. He's done a lot over the last 2 years. Now, in a pinch-hitting role like this, sure, great. But that's what it needs to be recognised as, a pinch-hitting role. This isn't a sustainable, this is fully his position on the team. Miami with a nice bounce back there, but they're going to need to do some work. You can't be lumped in with Indiana and be really struggling 7th, 8th seed. Could cause some damage for them. Down to Milwaukee, 1-2 on the week, 32-16. Yes, 1-2 since Doc Rivers joined the team. Defeated New Orleans, lost to Denver and Portland. Giannis big week, 28.7 points. Giannis big week, death taxes. And this is a guy who's routinely 30, 11 and 6. So 28.7 points, 10.7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 0.7 blocks on 3 turnovers, 62.7 from deep. 62.7 from the field, 50% from deep, 60.6 from the free throw line. Give it time. Doc Rivers is going to change things again. So, was it the right move? I could make a good case it was not the right move for Milwaukee. I don't know anyone that disagrees that it wasn't the right move for Milwaukee. But we can't sit there and say it's a failed project after a week. Let's see how they look after the All-Star break. Let's see how they look at the end of March. The end of March will be the real test. And then how do they close the last 2 weeks of April out, and how do they sit heading into the postseason? People don't like doing analysis like that because it's not in the moment. But that's real analysis. You're not going to be able to judge a team straight away like that. see what sort of energy changes up there. Milwaukee 1 and 2. They're still one of the 2 best teams, 3 best teams in the East. They've got one of the 3 best players on the planet. I'm sure they can work it out. We'll see how they go. Damian Lillard, an all-star starter. Not me. Not me at all. To be honest with you, at the time that all-star voting closed, I probably would have had Dame in the 12. Just on the season, I probably would have had Dame in the 12. But as far as suggesting that he should have been ahead of Tyrese Halliburton, of Donovan Mitchell, a Jaylen Brown, a Jalen Brunson, or a Trey, even to that extent, not for me. Not for me. He probably would have been my last selection in the East. Made an all-star game, that's great. Awesome. I just don't think... I think there were others out there. I certainly think there were others out there. I tell you who is out there, though. That's the New York Knicks, and they are hot on the tail of the Milwaukee Bucks, and why wouldn't they be with a new candidate in a particular top 10, which we'll get to a little later on. New York 4-0, 32-17 on the season, defeated Miami, Charlotte, Utah, and Indiana, and Jalen Brunson is balling. 33.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks on 1 turnover. 50.5 from the field, 34.6 from deep, and 82.8 from the line. Jalen Brunson might be the most beloved New York Knicks since Patrick Ewing. Jalen Brunson may be having more of an impact as a Knick than Carmelo Anthony. Because Jalen Brunson is at the point now where he may be the most popular New York athlete right now. Not bad for a guy who was a terrible selection as a second option for Luka Doncic, who has barely been able to find a chemistry mix since. Jalen Brunson is a beast. I speak with a few different Knick fans, and it's the one thing that I refer to all the time. Jalen Brunson set the tone for what he was going to be in the New York Knicks in his very first game, where he takes a charge and willingly forces OT. Here's a guy laying his body on the line. Now, contrary to what people are going to believe based on what I've just said, I don't disagree with Becky Hammond. I don't disagree with anyone who makes the comment or the assumption small guys don't lead you to championships. They don't. There are legitimately 3 players in league history who can have a case as the number 1 on a team under 6'4", let alone 6'6". Steph Curry is one of them. Isaiah Thomas is another. And if you really want to stretch the fact that Bill Russell was a rookie, Bob Cousy. That's it. That's not a slight on Brunson. That's a fact of the game. It's a big man sport. Even Michael Jordan is considered a small guy at 6'6". Go and look at every best player on a championship team. Go and look at every league MVP. And tell me about the really small guys who won the award. Allen Iverson, Sixers to the finals, 35 a game. He ran into Shaq and Kobe, I get it. Look how big they are. Steve Nash, probably should have a championship, I agree. But he runs into Dirk and he runs into Tim Duncan. Just perspective. But don't get me wrong, the Knicks are firing. Brunson is firing. The New York Knicks being up and about is good for the league. I know I say a lot about having small markets, but I tell you what, an up and about New York Knicks team is just different for the NBA. It just is different, and it just hits different. This is a team that's brought into their hype, but now they're starting to deliver. Massive, massive effort. Orlando, they've had a nice bounce-back week. They're now 3 games above 500. 26-23, 3-1 on the week. Defeated Phoenix, San Antonio, Minnesota. Lost out to Dallas. Paolo Banchero, another big week. 27.5 points, 5.8 rebounds, 6.8 assists, 50.6 from the field, 50% from deep, 65.5 from the free throw line, 2.3 turnovers. Really simple stuff. Put points on the board, play efficiently, win games. Orlando clearly have a defense that can work. They have players that don't have a fear of putting numbers up. But it's a matter of doing it efficiently and effectively, and it's something Orlando started to do this week. And it's turned them around. It's turned them around. Really simple stuff. Spoken about it for, God, I don't know how long this season. It's just a matter of seeing the team perform. It's just a matter of being efficient and converting. It's just a matter of getting things done. Again, we're talking about a team that's essentially as a team in a sophomore slump. Give them another 2 seasons and see what they look like. It's like OKC. Like OKC are starting to really get to that junior year, senior year level of team. Give Orlando another 2 seasons on top of this year. Wait till this year ends, give them another 2 seasons. And you're going to see a genuine top 3 team. Genuine top 3 team. They are just really trying to tick along. Banchero really working hard to get his efficiency up, which is good to see. You then also have on the other side of it, Franz Wagner checking in as well, really playing some good basketball again. Banchero's an all-star this year. We knew it was going to happen. I said last year, after I'd watched him play half a season, I think he's going to be a perennial All-NBA guy at some point. I wouldn't be surprised you see him in a 3rd team this year. He's playing that well. He's playing that well. I think he's been one of the 10 best players in the league this year. He's playing that well. He's genuinely a star of this league. Speaking of stars in the league, Philadelphia took a hit with one of theirs. 1-3 on the week, 30-17 on the season, wins against Utah, lost to Denver, Portland and Golden State. I had Kelly Oubre as their best player, 20.3 points. Now, again, this is a guy who played in all of their games, 20.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 0.8 steals, 1.3 blocks, 1 turnover, 50.8 from the field, 78.6 from the stripe, 22.2 from the line. Would like from deep it to be better. There are 2 key talking points. Number 1, they had 2 All-Stars. Tyrese Maxey, working hard, got the All-Star selection. I personally wouldn't have had him in. I do factor in your impact and leading teams to wins. That's not to say that his game hasn't reflected that of an All-Star. I just didn't have him as an All-Star. He's had a really good season. Great second option season. No doubt about it. The other one that was nominated to an All-Star, the guy who, in the minds of many, appeared to be leading the MVP race, and that was Joel Embiid. There's only one issue. Joel Embiid is now not going to play enough games due to a knee injury. So Joel Embiid will be ineligible under the injury rule, the first major player in this clause that will not play 65 games. A guy who was having a scoring year, the best we've seen since Kareem. Almost 50 years ago. A genuine all-time centre season. Points on the board, more efficient offensively, far more committed defensively, just playing the game, and now he's out. And the 65 game rule will cause concern for him. And the next concern it will cause is Philadelphia, because how do they go as a unit without Embiid? Some have said they're a lottery team without Embiid. I don't think that. I think you would be talking more a playing team, because they still have talent. They still have some good guys around them. Maxey an all-star, and Tobias Harris as a 3rd option isn't a bad 3rd option. But when you lose arguably the best centre in the league this season to an injury, you are always going to be in some trouble. So this will be the major concern for Philly. This will be the major concern for Embiid, who, based on the media conversation this year, not my personal preference, but on media conversation this year, probably would have had a back-to-back MVP. And from my understanding, would have been the first back-to-back MVP and the first player to win a back-to-back scoring title and a back-to-back MVP since Michael Jordan. Embiid was building a resume. Would have been 3 straight scoring titles, would have been 2 straight MVPs, back-to-back scoring title and MVP. Hasn't happened since Jordan. And that's now not going to happen, and Philadelphia now look like a different team. Maxey with a 50-piece in his first lone game. But the only criticism I have there is it's okay. We know you had 51. Don't hold up the piece of paper. I don't know why anyone holds up the piece of paper. Wilt Chamberlain had 100 points. Tyrese Maxey had 51. If he wrote it on an A5 piece of paper, sure, great, I'm up for that. Don't grab an A4 piece of paper, write 50 on it when the man had 100. My God. Philadelphia appear to probably be in a bit of trouble. Toronto, 1-2 in the week, 17-31. Defeated Chicago, lost out to Atlanta and Houston. Scotty Barnes, another consistent week by him. 21.7 points, 5 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 0.7 steals and 0.7 blocks. High turnover rate probably didn't help there. 48.9 from the field, 20% from deep, 90.9 from the free throw line. And I think Toronto are just at that stage now where they're going to feel out the rest of the season. They're going to see what works. They're going to see what players fit in where. Probably look to make a couple of moves in the off-season and reset. Easiest way to look at Toronto at the moment. Not much else going on for them. Scotty Barnes needs to be their focus. Dennis Schroeder, a good little veteran for them. See how things continue to turn. Finally, Washington, 2-2 on the week. And thankfully they won those 2 games against, well, Detroit and San Antonio of all teams. Otherwise, they would have the second worst record in the league, and I would be very much bound to say worse than Detroit, despite the fact they have one more win. They defeated the Pistons and the Spurs, lost out to the Clippers and the Heat. Kyle Kuzma, their best player. 22 points, 5.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.3 steals and a block on 1.5 turnovers. 43.4 from the field, 23.1 from deep. Not ideal. Converted at the line, which is about the only positive I can say for Washington all week. They beat the worst team in the league and the youngest team in the league. Really good stuff there. The same type of people that honestly probably enjoy beating their own kids in sport, or enjoy watching the Commonwealth Games, things of that nature. Best player of the week, the only man to lead his team to 4-0, Jalen Brunson. As I mentioned before, 33.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.5 blocks on 1 turnover, 50.5 from the field, 34.6 from deep, 82.8 from the free throw line. Jalen Brunson has just been on a tear. He has become the heart and soul of the New York Knicks. He has become the heart and soul of New York sports, and that includes Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge was the man last year. This year, it's Jalen Brunson, the king of New York, the king of the Knicks. A guy who, for some Knicks fans, is doing what Patrick Ewing used to do to them as far as bringing joy to their lives as Knicks fans. Genuinely having a big impact on the team, having a big impact on player awards, all-star selections. You've got to remember too, this is a guy who's taken the number 1 mantle from Julius Randle, really wrestled that away towards the playoffs last year, certified it this year, genuine MVP talk around him. And I tell you what, if the Knicks are going to keep pushing, there's going to be some chatter. There is going to be some chatter. People underestimate how powerful that New York media market is. Wait and see what the Knicks continue to do in February and towards March. If they have bolted up the Eastern Conference, look out. Because Jalen Brunson's name is going to get a lot more conversation. A lot more conversation. A big week by him. Really happy to see him getting some stuff done. Really putting in the work. Really getting the Knicks on his side. From there, we'll look at the top 10 of the East so far. This is how the standings sat as of the second. The Celtics and the Bucks on top, but as I said, the Knicks rampaging right up through the seedings, as are the Cavaliers, and I think you'll see both of them continue to tick. The Sixers have taken a hit, but they sit well clear compared to the Pacers and the Heat. The Magic, they're probably going to be the next team on the tail there. The Bulls and the Hawks genuinely going to be fighting it out. And I think the Bulls are clearly better than the Hawks, but they're going to be the 2 teams that everyone is going to be discussing, the 2 teams that everybody is going to try and attack. If you are Brooklyn at this point, Toronto maybe, but certainly Brooklyn, they're the teams you're looking to attack if you're going to try and sneak into the East. But that is how the Eastern Conference sat through 14 weeks of the 23-24 NBA season. And moving immediately over into the West, and we start with the Dallas Mavericks. 1-2 in the week, 26-22. So realistically, amongst the big fish in the pond over there in the West, They are probably just a little bit of a guppy at the moment in comparison. Defeated Orlando, lost to Sacramento, Minnesota. Tim Hardaway Jr., their best player across all of those games. 23 points, 5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1 steal, less than or just around 1 turnover a game. 48% from the field, 35.7 from deep, 84.6 from the free throw line. Dallas side, they're not going to be able to compete. I mean, I understand the big numbers that are being put up there by Luka Doncic. I understand the massive contributions that Kyrie Irving's making, but they are not a championship team. And ultimately, it's the same story with Luka for the last 3 seasons. Massive numbers to open the season, historical numbers in comparison to everybody else. And they don't win too many games, but at the end of it, look at who he stacks up against. Well, he doesn't really stack up against anybody if he's not producing wins. And they've had one conference final run where they got beat pretty badly, and the team that beat them went on to win a championship. And if they'd have beat that team, they probably wouldn't have won the championship. I don't know, Dallas need a lot more substance to what they're serving up right now, because there's no substance to it. It's not substantial. It's the only way to put it. A lot of work needs to be done there. They need to be a genuine contender. They need a second option right now that's all NBA defensive. That would be a really good start to them, and it needs to be someone that can play ball out of hand and still able to be, offensively productive. Because Luka's not getting that ball out of his hands anymore. Here's a guy averaging, 35, 8, and 9 for the season, or around 35, 8, and 10 for the year. He's not getting that ball out of his hands, but guess what? He's not getting wins. And as much as people don't want to believe it, it's about getting wins. They're not doing it right now. A team that is, though, they're 8 games clear of Dallas. That's Denver. 3-1 on the week, 34-16 on the season. Defeated Philadelphia and Milwaukee. Really key there. Lost out to Oklahoma City, so nice little return serve. Defeated Portland as well. Jamal Murray, the best player for Denver across that period, playing in all games. 21.8 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 0.8 steals, 1.3 blocks, less than 2 turnovers. Not a fan of shooting sub 45 from the field, but 36.7 from deep, 75% from the line I can live with. Denver just starting to make a bit of a move. They're now starting to show, we're still here. Don't let us have home court advantage. Don't give us a chance to be right up near the top. Because if you're going to compare them to everyone else who's right in contention right now, they're there. They're a couple of wins away from the top seed. Really interesting time there if you are out in the West and trying to scale out what exactly is going to happen. Because Denver are going to be an impact player. They're continuing to be an impact player, and they're just starting to show don't give us a sniff. Because they've got a roster that's as good enough to win it as anybody's. Experience-wise, you'd have to give them the edge in the West. You'd have to, on experience, give them the edge in the West, and I think it would be more than interesting to watch them play against Boston, who now feel they have that answer at center in Porzingis. I would love to watch a Celtics Nuggets NBA Finals. And I hope it happens, because I think it'd be very interesting. Because I don't think we're going to see a Philadelphia-Denver NBA Finals. And besides, Embiid had only played 3 games. Golden State 2-1 on the week, 21-24 on the season. Defeated Philadelphia and Memphis, lost out to the Lakers. Steph Curry still just trying to do everything but replicate himself to play on the team. 34.3 points, 5.7 rebounds, 6.7 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks, 4 turnovers. It's going to happen. 51.5 from the field, 48.3% from deep, 100% from the line. Steph Curry needs help. Steph Curry needs the roster blown up, and Steph Curry needs more people on this team. Because at the moment he's not getting any production. At the moment he's not getting any assistance. The big credit I can give Golden State is Jonathan Kuminga, who, after calling the coach out about minutes, calling the coach out about playing time, has done the one thing he needed to do to repay his coach. And that's ball, and that's play. He had no choice. The problem is there's no one else on this team that's wanting to do it. Draymond still evidently has issues. He's now just displaying that by extremely poor play. Clay's had a couple of up and down weeks. But I'm not going to expect a guy who's torn an ACL or done an Achilles and a quad, those sort of level of injuries. He's not going to get back to being 5-time All-Star Klay Thompson. Don't expect him to. Steph named as another All-Star. Understandable. If I was going to base the MVP purely on leading teams to wins, Steph Curry is in the conversation as a top 10 player in the league this year. But instead, they're 3 games below 500. Oh, and let's just remind too, there's going to be a massive game we talk about his in the next weekly review. In a loss. Steph needs help. He's the most I would near say he's the most untradeable player in the NBA right now. But if you're Golden State and you're not willing to move everybody else, move Steph and see what happens. Because you will soon see a lot of the issues unravel with Golden State. Steph Curry is the Tim Duncan of his era. Oh, Steph's the system. Steph's the team. It's evident, it's clear. Houston 2-2 on the week, 23-25. Yes, they are playing better than Golden State. And there's not a sentence I thought I would say at all this season. 2-2 on the week, defeated the Lakers and the Raptors, lost out to Brooklyn and New Orleans. Jalen Green with a really nice week. 24.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.5 blocks, less than 2 turnovers, 49.3 from the field, 37.5 from deep, 93.8 from the free throw line. And now there's talks that he's on the trade block. Or at least a key tradable piece. Now, I don't mind if that means that you facilitate more touches through Şengün, if there's going to be an increase in productivity for Van Vliet, for Brooks, Tari Eason, that's great. But if it's going to result in us risking a young second option for not much in return or a real aging vet, I don't like it. If it was for Bojan Bogdanovic, you'd probably hear me saying a different tune. Because that's an older guy and a veteran style guy, but he's going to produce and he's going to bring culture. There's different facets of the game that he would bring that would make it a bonus. But I don't think getting rid of Jalen Green is going to do much to change Houston's situation. The fact we're 2 games close to 500, nearly 50 games into the season, astounds me as a Rockets fan. And I think that speaks volumes of how good of a season Şengün's had and where he sits in the most improved conversation. Some genuine conversation there. I think Şengün was an all-star. It really befuddles me there that he wasn't. I'm just going to double check this while I'm recording. He would have been an all-star for me. I have no issues with saying he would have been an all-star for me. Maybe there's a Rockets bias there, but again, I base this on how many times do you lead your team to a win. And that's just how I felt. I'd have certainly had him over Paul George. I'd have certainly had him over Anthony Davis. And I certainly would have had him over Devin Booker. Sabonis would have been sitting in that list as well. I think that's just how good of a year he has had. I had him over LeBron James too. I don't think LeBron James should be in the All-Star game. Don't care whether that's a crime or not. It's the same principle as previous. If you are not one of the 12 best players in your conference for me, as far as leading your team to wins this season, I don't have you as an All-Star. I would not have had LeBron James as an All-Star. Shock and awe factor. Sorry, it's just how I say it. But Şengün's had a really good year. Again, just wonder, with that trade, what do they do for Jalen Green? Who do they bring in? What's replacing him? Is it effective? If it is, great. If it's not, let's keep the young guy. Let's try and keep getting some minutes into him. For the Clippers, 3-1 on the week. And they are making a march much like Cleveland and much like New York. And they've got a guy who, much like Cleveland and New York, is not getting enough appreciation. And that's Kawhi Leonard. 3-1 on the week, as I mentioned. 32-15 for the Clippers. Boston, Washington, Detroit, they defeated. Lost out to Cleveland. Kawhi Leonard, massive week once again. Efficient week once again. 30 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, a game. 0.8 turnovers. Yes, that's right, 0.8 turnovers. 59.8 from the field, 50% from deep, and 100 from the free throw line. Kawhi Leonard, when he is on, may be the most efficient player in basketball. On both sides of the floor. Smooth, gets to his spot, does what he wants, converts when it matters, takes down the Giants, delivers when he needs to. There's a genuine case that Kawhi Leonard has been a top 10 MVP candidate this year. There's a case that Kawhi Leonard has been a top 10 player in the league this year. Kawhi Leonard to me is definitely an all-star. And unfortunately for Kawhi, he's getting a very similar treatment to Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson in that he's put the team on the back and the success of the team is predicated on their success. But the other thing for Kawhi as well is he's getting the same treatment as another guy who I think is the MVP of the league this year, in that they're just not talking, they're not paying attention to it. They don't seem to look at it the same way, and I don't really know what it is. But we're talking about a guy who, on his night, when he's the best player on the floor, on a win, and the Clippers win, there's a very strong correlation there, would be the best way I'd put it. A very strong correlation. It's a genuine, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens come voting time, come All-NBA time. Where does Kawhi Leonard sit? Because I think you're looking at an All-NBA selection for Kawhi Leonard this year. I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing an All-Defensive selection for Kawhi Leonard this year. He's had that big of a year. He's had that big of a year that he's overshadowed the fact that Paul George was pretty good this year too. I don't think Paul George has been All-Star this year in comparison. But Paul George has been pretty good this year, and he's almost an afterthought with how good Kawhi's played. But the conversation around the Clippers hasn't been that. It's been the health of Paul George, it's been the health of Kawhi Leonard, it's been the chemistry with Westbrook and Harden. It hasn't been how substantially better Kawhi Leonard has been. And this is clearly his best season since he started as a Clipper, and easily his best season since the Raptors. Almost the best Kawhi's looked in 5 years. For the Lakers, 2-2 on the week, they're now at 500, 25-25. Defeated Golden State and defeated Boston undermanned. I'll get to that in a second. Lost out to Houston and Atlanta. Austin Reeves was their best player on the week. 21.3 points, 1.8 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.3 steals, less than 3 turnovers, 45.8 from the field. It's the 42.9 from deep that's key, and 76% from the free throw line. They defeated Boston without Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Boston not underhanded by any stretch. Big, crucial win for the Lakers. And I think it does 3 things. Number 1, it shows what happens to any team when they're not prepared against not able to deliver a full comprehensive scout in a pro league. Because I'd like to know how much Boston really tried to scout beyond Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Number 2, it shows there are key pieces on this team that can get the job done when you give them possessions, when you give them looks and let them play. And number 3, which also, just to revert to number 2, probably shows that, hey, we have a good enough roster to compete. So there's no need to go and throw us out in the river and put us up a creek without a paddle. And number 3, I think it shows the coach can coach. Professional team still needs to scout. If it's not prepared, going to be in trouble. Yes, you might consider them role players, but those role players can clearly play when given the opportunity and need touches. Similar to how most of them played when they were given opportunity and touches. And number 3, it's clearly not a coaching issue, because if he's got all these pieces and getting wins against the best team in the league, then where does the problem lie? Well, the problem wasn't lying, the problem was sitting, and they were in street clothes. It's clearly an Anthony Davis, LeBron James team. No question about that. It's clear that LeBron James controls this team. LeBron James has controlled every team that he's been on ever since he went back to Cleveland. He had a little bit of a say in Miami. I got no doubt he had a little bit of a say in Miami. But when he wasn't getting the full 9 yards with Pat Ryan and Eric Spoelstra, he went back to Cleveland and they just give him the keys to the car. And for some reason, the Lakers have done the same thing here as well. And Anthony Davis has shown when he's on the floor, and in the last 12 months, in the actual calendar 12 months, he's played more basketball than anybody. It's freaky to say. So wherein lies the issue here? The Lakers are at 500 with a bunch of role players that they went and got themselves, that clearly performed in other circumstances, that can clearly perform, with a coach who can clearly coach, taking down the best team in the league without their 2 best players, 2 All-Stars, one of the 10 best players in the league, arguably, the Defensive Player of the Year, arguably, and they're only a 9th seed. Maybe the media won't say anything about it. That'd be my guess. Memphis 0-4 on the week, 18-31 on the season. So there, again, we know what position that Memphis are in. They're not going to be doing much with anybody or anything until at least March again, and it's going to be too little too late. Lost to Indiana, Sacramento, Cleveland and Golden State. Jaren Jackson Jr., their best player, and you've only got to look at the fact that he shot less than 40% from the field, less than 20% from deep to summarise the week. 24.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists. Couple of defensive numbers there, 1.3 steals, 1.5 blocks. But 3.5 turnovers, worse than 40% from the field, worse than 20% from deep. Memphis, terrible week. Played awfully. Minnesota, 2-2 on the week. 34-14 on the season, one of the 3 best teams in the West. Defeated Oklahoma City and started to again remount a case as the best team in the West. Also defeated Dallas, lost out to the Spurs and Orlando. And despite a down week, still remaining productive. Anthony Edwards, 22.5 points, 4 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 0.8 steals, 3.3 blocks. 55.7 from the field, 52.2 from deep, 76.9 from the free throw line. Minnesota are now starting to be on that. They're a good team. They don't just have good individuals, they have a good team. Anthony Edwards, to me, has still been an all-NBA level player this year. Rudy Gobert, to me, has still been a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And to an extent, Karl Anthony Towns has been a genuine second option, a genuine all-star option. Now, I don't think that at the time the voting closed, he was an all-star. He wasn't in my squad. And it does speak volumes about how highly considered he has been this year. But Anthony Edwards, with a down week, still producing wins, still getting votes on the board in my book. It's good to see him continuing to produce, still good to see him getting the job done, trying to lead his team. It's going to be really significant to see exactly just how that continues to pan out for the rest of the year. As I said, I have no issues with saying that Minnesota, one of the 3 best teams in the West, certainly going to be a team that is going to be hard to consider against as far as the playoffs are concerned. They're a genuine second-round team, genuine semi-final team. How much further they go beyond that is certainly a question. How much experience proves key in a potential matchup with Oklahoma City is key. Now, from an experience standpoint, if you're going to put that against OKC, yeah, you might have a Western Conference finalist. And you might see them taking on Jokic and Denver. That'd be a really interesting matchup. But it does come down to that experience. Let's see how that continues to play out for them. But they're continuing to prove to be a team that everyone needs to watch and needs to worry about. 20 games above 500 is no joke, ladies and gentlemen. No joke. Another team. Will they be... And there are potentially 3 of them, maybe 4 of them, depending on how the Clippers play. Can they be 50 wins before 20 losses? That's the conversation we're now having. They're really starting to ramp up that pressure on themselves towards championship contention. New Orleans continuing to pod along, still in the top 6, 7 games above 500, defeated Houston and San Antonio, lost out to Milwaukee and Boston for a 2-2 week. Probably a fair measuring stick for them, really showing that they are around that 6th, 7th seed, no higher, probably a genuine first-round team. Could cause an upset if they are on. Brandon Ingram, a nice week, 24.3 points, 6.8 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 0.8 steals and 1 block, 48.7 from the field, 33.3 from deep, 81.8 from the free throw line. A prime example of why winning fixes everything. An absolute prime example of why winning fixes everything. Look at all the talk that went on with this team. Zion's not happy. Oh, Brandon Ingram's back, but he's not doing much. CJ McCollum, he's injured. Still think he does take too many shots. You know, what's it going to be like when he comes back? And they're a better team. They're looking like the first round team that played in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago. There's no reason why they can't return to that form either. But, yeah, they're probably a middle of the pack team. That measurement against Boston and Milwaukee would be accurate. Certainly better than Houston, who's, you know, right on that playing precipice. Certainly better than the Spurs. Well, it'd be interesting to see. How do they close out November after the February after the All-Star break? How do they look in March? But I think we're talking about a genuine top 6 team here. Because as much as other teams might be winning and starting to get on their tail or get ahead, they're not falling behind. And they're a team that if they're going to be playing a Sacramento or a Phoenix and they're off, it's going to cause some real problems. They're the team that is certainly right now across the entire league, they are the team that's going to cause more headaches for playoff contending teams than anybody, East and West. Their implications are obviously greater in the West, but they will shake up a few teams in the East. There's no doubt about that. Back to one of our other teams that are genuinely, certainly one of the 4 teams I would think right now sitting here in the West. Are they 50 before 20? That's the Oklahoma City Thunder. 2-2 in the week, 34-14 on the season. Defeated Denver and Charlotte. Big win against Denver. Would expect them to defeat Charlotte. Lost to Minnesota and ultimately is what cost them the number 1 seed. And lost out to Denver. Somehow, some way they lost out to Detroit. They somehow lost out to Detroit. I don't know how. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with just another SGA week. 33.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 2.3 steals or 1.3 blocks. 3 turnovers a game. 58.7 from the field, 75% from deep, 88.6 from the free throw line. And now with the injury to Joel Embiid per NBA.com, second favourite in the MVP. And ladies and gentlemen, I have not shied away from the fact that I think he should be the MVP this year. And I think it's becoming one of those situations where, but the team's good. But look what everyone else is contributing. Yeah, but that might be a fair assessment. Josh Giddey seems to have bounced back in the last month. Chet Holmgren, clearly the second best rookie of the year. Plenty of options on this team. And yet, here's a guy that's putting up numbers that some bloke from Chicago wearing a 23 used to put up. Everyone thought that, what's going on here? They like all these big numbers and all the production. Here's a snapshot for you. Shai's a more efficient scorer. He's a better defender and provides more of an all-around impact on the result of a game than Luka Doncic. He's done it more than Anthony Edwards. He's done it more this season than Steph Curry. He's done it more than Donovan Mitchell. Do I need to keep going on? Jalen Brunson. Do I need to keep going on about all these guys that everyone in the media loves to speak about, that everyone is gloating over? But the one guy they're not speaking about is close to the very top of the West, having one of the best seasons we've seen from a shooting guard in 30 years from a two-way standpoint. And nobody's batting an eyelid. If Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was doing this in New York, don't worry about Nikola Jokic in the MVP race. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would nearly be the biggest name in the NBA if he did this in New York, Boston or Los Angeles. A rounded 33, 6 and 7, 2 steals, 1 block, 59, 75, 89. What a week. And all we get is, maybe now we consider him up there in the MVP. Well, I hate to break it, ladies and gentlemen. He's in my MVP race. And it's a matter of wondering who's going to catch him in my MVP race, not if he's going to catch anybody else. Simple as that. Phoenix 2-2 on the weekend. They've started to make that move, as I mentioned, sitting around that 5, 6, 7 mark. 2-2, 28 and 21 on the season. Defeated Miami and Brooklyn, lost out to Orlando and Atlanta. A nice week by Devin Booker. 28 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 1 block, 2 turnovers a game. 52.4 from the field, 38.5 from deep, 80% from the line. Devin Booker continues to be Devin Booker. I'm glad he got an all-star selection. I wouldn't have had him as an all-star, but I understand. Of course, there's a team that is actually sitting above them with one guy who's having a very similar season to him, and another guy who I think has been one of the 3 best centers in the league this year. They didn't get a nomination, but we'll get to them shortly. Really nice effort from Devin Booker, really starting to click. It's now just a matter of what happens with Phoenix from the All-Star break. because players have stepped up and they've got wins on the board. All three of their scorers are proving to be the key scorers they need to be. Nurkic is still doing his job. Phoenix really are lacking depth, but it's much like previous seasons. They're so elite at the top end. Sometimes the depth isn't at all a concern. And that's certainly how it looks right now for Phoenix. Again, I don't think Devin Booker's been their best player this year, but I still think he's their most valuable player. And I think Devin Booker's made a case as one of the three best Phoenix Suns of all time. And that's with the absolute due respect to Connie Hawkins, to Paul Westphal, to Larry Nance, all of those guys. Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion, all of those guys. That's how good of a player I think Devin Booker has been for Phoenix. 28-21, they've still got some growing to do. They're a team that can still certainly get well into the late 40s in wins. Certainly a team that can still do that if they stay healthy, if chemistry persists. We saw what they could do in the playoffs last year. They're a team that certainly could be reckoned with if they get moving. Portland 2-2 on the week, 15-34 on the season. Defeated Philadelphia and Milwaukee. I can't believe I'm saying that. They defeated Philadelphia and Milwaukee, the second and third seeds in the East, and then they lose to Chicago, sitting around 9th or 10th, and lost out to Denver, the number one team in the West. Sometimes you just can't put it together. Scoot Henderson with a consistent week, or a nice-ish week, I should say. 17.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.5 blocks. I am not stepping back from the fact that I don't think he should have come into the NBA this year, but it's good to see he's having moments. He's showing what people are backing him in to do. Less than two turnovers a game, I should say, on the week. 53.8 from the field, 50% from deep, 95.7 from the free throw line. Portland, again, just a bunch of misfits. They're trying to get things moving. They're not moving much, though. You lose Robert Williams, the best defender on the team. DeAndre Ayton's failed to step up. You don't have a star. A few misguided young players, where your most veteran experienced player is your Malcolm Brogdons and Jeremy Grants. There's still a bit of work to do there for Sacramento. They're working on it. Sorry, not for Sacramento, for Portland. They're working on it. A team that has worked on it is Sacramento, and a team that should be absolutely disgusted with the All-Star process. 3-1 on the week. 28-19 on the season. Defeated Dallas, Memphis, and Indiana. Miami was their only loss. Domantas Sabonis, their best player. 20.5 points. 16.3 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks, high usage rate, 3.5 turnovers, 67.3 from the field, 66.7 from deep, 82.4 from the free throw line. He's been one of the 12 best players in the West. He's clearly been the best player for Sacramento. He's clearly been the third best player at center this season, and he wasn't an all-star. Add to that, 7th on the NBA.com MVP ladder, and he's not an all-star. Absolutely crazy that Sabonis is not considered that, because we're talking about teams below them that have two, and by no means should even be close to being considered in comparison to Sabonis. And a few people are arguing De'Aaron Fox, and if you want to make the case that he's had as good a year as Devin Booker, I understand. I get it. I don't agree with that. I don't think De'Aaron Fox is an all-star this year, but I get it. Just a dumb. This is another example of what I say when it's clear that people who vote, I get it's a fan vote. I understand that people in New York are not going to be looking in Sacramento. I get that people in Los Angeles aren't looking at Sacramento. But when you have a weighted vote that includes the media and a weighted vote that includes players, I don't know what gets said on the court. I don't know what the back stories are to some of these guys. But how anybody can look at that and not suggest that Domantas Sabonis hasn't been the third best center in the league this year and has not deserved to be an all-star selection is wild. To say that it's crazily egregious would be an understatement. A guy who the NBA.com has as the 7th in their MVP race is not an all-star. ridiculous stuff in the NBA. The Spurs 1-3 on the week, 10-39. They've cracked double digits on the season, defeated Minnesota, lost out to Washington, New Orleans, and Orlando. Another big week for Wemby. Best way to put it. 20.5 points, 10.8 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.8 steals, 3.3 blocks. This dude's a rookie. This dude's 19. He has run away with the Rookie of the Year voting right now. He's not even playing 30 minutes a game. He's playing the equivalent of NBL numbers here in Australia, where a really good centre might play 28 minutes a night. 49.2 from the field, 27.8 from deep, 81.3 from the free throw line. And his total steals and blocks numbers are already ahead of Rudy Gobert's totals for when he won Defensive Player of the Year in 2018. This dude is dominant. This dude needs 35 minutes a game, and he needs every offensive possession to run through his hands, whether he passes or just throw it up and let him catch it. Because I know everyone uses the, oh, but that's not fair, oh, that doesn't make any sense, oh, they're just utilising his height. Yeah, and you should. Utilise every advantage you have on the court. Because this is a guy a couple of weeks ago who decided to get a sham god move out on a dribble and nearly tomahawk dunked it from the other side of the lane. He threw a looping hook shot. And I'm talking, looked like an old school, 50s and 60s looping hook shot. This man could have just turned around and dunked it. And he nearly did. Scary thoughts. As I said, Spurs would be way better off with veteran experience. I've got no question they're nearly 20 wins better. I would have no issue in seeing a team that's 47. If they were 24 and 23 with veterans, wouldn't shock me. And then we'd be having a different conversation about Wembanyama. A very different conversation. Rookie of the Year wouldn't be the only thing he would be contending for. Finally, the Utah, the slump was going to come 1-3, 24 and 26 on the season. Defeated Charlotte, lost to Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia. A nice run by Markkanen, 22-9, 2.3 assists, 0.8 steals. Less than 2 turnovers, I can give him that, and 50-40-100 split, so starting to be efficient there. The Utah slump was going to happen. It was a matter of when. But again, they're a team that, you know, they're 2 games above 500. They're much like Houston. They're very much capable of beating a team. They've got a very nice young core with lots of capability right there. Don't be shocked to see Utah still looking to push for things in February and trying to make a mess in March. Because if you're Utah and you're Houston and you're a team that's contending for, 8th, 9th, 10th, and you're trying to get into a play-in, they are going to want to do more damage to an opposition to give themselves a chance than they are legitimately winning games to boost their win percentage at some points. It does happen in sports, and I don't understand why. I think Utah's just going to be on that precipice of doing that. Something I genuinely think they can do and will do when they get the opportunity to, for sure. See how they continue to pan out. Markkanen, a really nice season. Another guy who I thought really made a hard enough run to be pushing towards All-Star selection. Really, really did. Genuinely thought in the West he was a chance. Now, obviously, it's not as egregious as Sabonis, but he's had a nice year. Again, I just think it comes down to this whole, oh, we love the game, or we watch the league, or this and that. Clearly, people don't. I'm so sick of people who suggest they do when they don't. If this is something I can do as a hobby and manage to keep a full track of the league, what are people paid to do? Actually do this stuff? What are they actually doing? No sense to me. Player of the week was a tough one. A really tough one. You had Sabonis in Sacramento with a massive week. An absolutely huge week. He wasn't my selection. The Clippers, really nice week. Denver, a really nice week. So there were options. But I did settle on Kawhi Leonard as my player of the week. Really nice run for him. Rounded numbers, 30 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block. It's the epic efficiency that comes with it with Kawhi Leonard. You know he picks his spots. You know he executes. You know he gets it done on both ends. and you know he's efficient on both ends when he does it. It results in wins. It's resulting in a top 10 season. Kawhi's clearly been the Clippers' best player. I can make a genuine case Kawhi Leonard has been the best player in Los Angeles this year. And clearly one of the 3 best players in California. Really, really easy stuff for me. Kawhi with a massive week. Kawhi's been huge for the Clippers. If he's going to make 65 games, we're going to see an All-NBA selection. And if he's going to play 65 games, and you're going to see the Clippers keep winning games, that third tier might soon see them jump to tier 2, as far as contenders are concerned. Genuinely scary thought at the Clippers if they stay healthy, particularly with a healthy Kawhi Leonard. We know what he can do. We know what he's done in the past. We know he can continue to do it in the future. Top 10 in the West to round out the video. The Timberwolves and the Thunder fighting out for the first spot. As you can see there, the Clippers have jumped into third. They're making a move as much as the Nuggets are making a move. What that means for both sides, I don't know. But if the Timberwolves and Thunder start running out of legs, and you've got the Clippers and the Nuggets, that could be dangerous. I'm not sold on the Clippers yet, but I very much think that they're starting to gain some retail value. Again, moving from there, the Kings, the Pelicans, and the Suns, they all sit around the same spot. It's understandable. I mean, how good is it as also to see the Pelicans, they don't have an all-star selection. The Lakers have 2. The Kings don't have an all-star selection. The Lakers have 2. Phoenix sitting in 7th. They've got 2. The Kings have none. The Pelicans have none. Mavericks, they're starting to push through. They're currently sitting at 8th. Sitting about where they need to be with a ball-dominant star who doesn't play defense. The Lakers at 9th. They're topsy-turvy. They're always got a headline around them at trade time. And the Jazz now at 10th, and they're going to continue to sit there as well. So that is the top 10 of the West, and that has been the 14th week of the 23-24 NBA season. Thanks for tuning in, guys. My next video, within 24 hours, will be speaking of a particular top 10 list with some really interesting features and player nominations as well. That's been me, guys. I'm out.